What a headshot! What a head!
How's it guys, this is Dayvy, FPL, and welcome back to the Fantasy Premier League video here on my channel. Now in this video, I'll be taking you guys to the top 5 overpriced defenders. So yes, that's right, last week spoke about the underpriced options, this week the polar opposite, who are the overpriced options and which defenders should you guys avoid. Now the first thing I want to say, and this is going to be a disclaimer on all my videos of this overpriced series, just because a player is featured on this list doesn't mean that you guys have to avoid them, it just means there might be a few warning labels if you are to choose them. Now I actually think some of these defenders might be the best options in the game, so I'll be going over them player by player and discussing whether to avoid them or whether to actually give them a chance. These players are on this kind of overpriced list because maybe last season they were injured, only got a few points, or they could have joined in the January transfer window. But the majority of these players might actually be on your list at the current moment, and this might just be a reminder to maybe think twice. So that's something I was interested in, sit back, relax, and let's get straight into it. Now I'll be going over this talking point relatively quickly. I did this in every single underpriced video, but maybe you guys are new to this channel or new to this series, so I'm going to give you guys some context of how I actually decided if the players are overpriced. So the player data that I used is going to be the points and the prices, but the points from last season and the prices of this current season, as that's what FPL used to price these options. It's a very important kind of distinction, it's points from last season, prices of this season, so we're learning from the past to predict the future. Then next up, not every defender was covered in my list. I did have a filter of plus 60 points. So I came to the 60 point margin because I just kind of thought these are options that had to have either played every game, 30 games min, and then got 2 appearance points every single fixture. And the 60 point mark also allowed players if they were injured or maybe started in January. If they got 1 or 2 attacking returns, 1 or 2 clean sheets, they'll still be on this list. And the last talking point is how I actually decided if they were over or underpriced. Well, I then plotted a regression line of those 60 plus point players, and if they were over or under that line, that's where they were under or overpriced. So I went over that quite quickly, but if you guys have any questions, drop them in the comments down below or on my Discord server where I'm slightly more active. But now let's go on to the actual overpriced options. So on screen right now, you guys are going to see the graph, and these are all the players that are under the regression line and therefore overpriced. Now we're going through all these kind of price points, but you guys are probably looking at the top right hand side. Yes, Trent Alexander-Arnold is overpriced, but don't worry, that doesn't mean that he's going to be kind of not worth it. It just means when you take him from an average point of view at his price point compared to other defenders with more than 60 points, he is lower than that average. Now the distance between him and that regression line isn't too much, but it is quite interesting to note. Now what I also will say is that kind of Trent at 8 million, you can't compare him to another midfield at the same price point because the defenders are usually great value for money and therefore their average points is pretty high. So what I'm saying is this regression line is purely kind of unique for defenders. You can't use this regression line for midfielders or forwards, but I'll be doing those videos in the upcoming days. So yes, the two big distinctions there are the two Liverpool more premium kind of defenders, Trent Alexander-Arnold and Andy Robertson. Both two options, similar kind of distance from the regression line, but do you think they're actually overpriced this season? To be honest, I think kind of FPL's done pretty well. I think it's kind of a good price point to get them at. I think what they've done here is that Trent has been super consistent for multiple seasons, and therefore while he might be overpriced on last season, the previous seasons he's done perfectly fine. So as I said, let me in the comments down below, do you think Trent's over or underpriced or just right? Now because we've spoken about Trent and Robertson, I think you're either going to go for Trent or no one. Don't really think that Robertson comes into account. I'm going to remove them from the graph so that you guys get a better graphic. So taking those two options away, we've got another obvious kind of player that you're going to be having question marks about. It's João Cancelo from Man City. So he comes in at 6.0 million, but he is back from Bayern Munich. Don't exactly know if he's going to stay at Man City this season, as him and Pep seem to have lost love. So I'm just going to consider the fact that Cancelo won't be an option this season, so let's go on to the 5.5s. Now these are the two main teams that I wanted to talk about. It's going to be Man City and it's going to be Chelsea. So John Stones, Ruben Diaz and Ben Chilwell all come in at 5.5, and you guys will notice that Reece James isn't here, but he didn't even get 60 points last season. So that's enough of a warning flag there. Maybe if he miraculously stays injury free this entire season, yes, go for Reece James, but please heed caution. But the players on the screen right now, Stones, Diaz and Chilwell, are considered to be kind of more played Man City and Chelsea defenders, and they are still overpriced. Now yes, I know that Ben Chilwell had his injury concerns, Stones, Diaz as well, but if you guys are going to pick a Man City defender, please be cautious. Now if we continue into the 5.0s, we have Perisic, Ake, Akanji, so 2 more Man City defenders here. Thiago Silva from Chelsea as well as Cucurella. Now with Kyle Walker probably going to leave the club, so does that make these other options even better? Maybe, potentially. I mean, him leaving the club maybe means more minutes for an Akanji, and therefore that makes him better value for money. Now if we do go into the 4.5s, there's a couple of options there that I'll mention when we go over the top 5 kind of most overpriced options, but I can't really see too many people actually picking these 4.5s to be honest. I think the only interesting one is going to be Emerson Royale, just comes in overpriced, but you guys will see in terms of the points per 90 minutes, he's actually a great asset. Two big additions in the 5.0 is also Martinez and Varane. Can't really see too many of us going for those kind of United centre backs, as Luke Shaw or maybe an Onana is a better asset. I just wanted you guys to take note of Wan-Bissaka and Malacia as well, because I'll mention them later in the video as they come in at 4.5. Now, there kind of any surprises yet that you guys do see? I think the big ones are the Man City and the Chelsea assets. Yet another reminder here that Pep loves to rotate. Chelsea options also like to be injured. So it's a massive risk to go for a James or a Chol, but if you can get it right, they're going to be great value for money. Same can be said about the Man City assets. Great starting fixtures to this season, so if you guys can get it right, predictors are going to play most minutes. They're absolute FPL gold. Now we're going to move on to the actual top 5 defenders that are overpriced. However, I've decided to kind of switch this up. The reason for this is that kind of different from the underpriced options, whoever's the most underpriced is a very kind of measurable metric. But in terms of the kind of overpriced options, you might just have a 4.5 that just cuts in at 60 points. Maybe was injured for the entire season, maybe didn't get too many minutes, and therefore they're obviously going to be overpriced. So what I decided to do is kind of go for the top 5 warning players. These are options that I potentially would avoid in those drafts, but if you are going to pick them, understand the risks. So the first player I want to talk about is going to be Wan-Bissaka, and I think in terms of that right-hand side of United's defense, either it's Diego Dalot or it's going to be Wan-Bissaka. Yes, they do come in cheap at 4.5, but quite hard to predict who's going to start for Ten Hag. So while Wan-Bissaka could be a potential option if he gets the majority of minutes, don't exactly know who's going to start at right back, so I would avoid them. Kind of the polar opposite for the left-hand side. Yes, we do have Malacia, that sort of thing, but I think that Luke Shaw should be nailed. Then we're going to move on to the big kind of elephant in the room. It's going to be Trent Alexander-Arnold, a massive kind of play at 8.0 million. A lot of debate going around. Should you have Trent? Should you not? Should you go for a cheaper defender, invest that money elsewhere? Trent is currently in my draft, but he's still considered overpriced. Now I'll be doing a massive analysis in next week's kind of defender video to actually measure if Trent is worth getting at 8.0 million, so make sure that you have the bell notifications on for that. But I just think that I have to talk about Trent in this kind of video because he is overpriced in terms of the metrics, but that's a massive talking point. Then we're going to go on one of my 2 teams that I wanted to speak about in this video. It's Man City assets. I've got John Stones here as I've seen that he's the most popular option, but please remember that John Stones is quite injury prone and also Pep loves to rotate. Now John Stones might be a favorite for you FPL managers because of the new inverted position, but that might not lead to more FPL points like we've seen with Trent. Things going to have a similar attacking threat at CDM compared to centre back, but this kind of is relevant to any Man City defender. So plug in Akeya, plug in an Akanji or a Diaz if you guys want to. Yes, they have great fixtures at the start of the season, but please just be cautious if you go for them because they might not play every game. What I would probably suggest, if you guys are going to go for Man City defender, make sure that you have a 4.5 defender on the bench, like a Botman or a Pau Torres. That way, if your Man City defender doesn't play, your 4.5 can come off the bench and still hopefully get you some FPL points. The next team is going to be the Chelsea assets. I've got Ben Shaw here because Reece James didn't even meet our metric. But are they due for a massive season under Pochettino? Now I want to see how the preseason kind of plays out. If they're playing a back 5, definitely going to look at them because that attacking threat is too hard to ignore. But please be cautious of these Chelsea defenders. We might have some rotation. I believe it will be less under Pochettino, but this could still happen. The big thing though, as I mentioned, it's the injury concerns, as these 2 options played hardly any minutes last season. Then the top option I want to talk about in terms of kind of overpriced options, it's going to be Robertson at 6.5 million. Now the reason for this isn't kind of Andy Robertson's fault, it is an FPL's kind of pricing fault. Yes, 6.5 is quite a lot, they didn't have the best season last season, but you're kind of going to go for Trent or no Liverpool defenders. Now we did speak about Van Dijk as the underpriced option, but as mentioned, it's Trent or bust. So let me know if you guys are looking at Andy Robertson, but I don't think anyone is at the current moment, and that's why I consider him to potentially be an avoid. So these top 5s, as I mentioned, I think that they're probably going to have a great FPL season. I mean, Stones could have a massive season, same as Ben Chilwell. But please just be cautious and have those warning signs if you do go for them. Now, if you're willing to accept the risks, 100% fine, go for it. But at least I've told you what could potentially come. Now, the final talking point I want to go over is the points per 90 minutes. Now, I'll be kind of rating this according to price in a future video. I just want to give you guys a taste of another stat to potentially look at. So as mentioned early on, if you guys are going to be looking at these defenders, they might have been injured, might not have had a lot of game time, but when you do consider their per game averages, they actually look pretty strong. For example, look at John Stones there, comes in just above that 4.5 mark, same as Ben Chilwell. So these 2 options, if they do stay fit, could be great FPL assets at their price points. We saw Emerson Royale there that I mentioned at 4.5, he's got a great kind of points per 90 minutes, as long as he does start. Just below him is another Man City defender, and that's why with these Man City options, as long as they play, they get you FPL points, but that's the big question. So at the end of this video, the kind of conclusion is these options are risky, but if you guys can get it right, the risk is going to be worth it. Now next week we'll be discussing if that risk is actually worth it. Going to discuss Man City options, going to discuss Chelsea options, and the big question obviously is Trent worth it? You guys can let me know your replies in the comments down below. How many Chelsea Man City defenders do you currently have, and do you guys have Trent in your current draft? But this is basically a wrap for the video, guys. Hope you did enjoy it. Please don't forget to like if you did and subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. Tons of content coming this preseason, so make sure the bell notifications have been turned on. And I'll be seeing you guys tomorrow when we do discuss the forwards. But I'm going to sign off. Dayvy FPL, and I'm out. Cheers, bye.